You are now locked into Radio Juxtapoz, the home of contemporary art and culture conversation. Coming up today.
I've always been into like people reading. Even at school, I used to do comic strips. And even if I had a diary, I would draw my diary out. I wouldn't actually write it out. I would draw literally these scenes. So I feel like everything for me was people reading. So I think that was always there. And that sort of came out afterwards. The older you get, you just sort of, you figure yourself out more.
This is Radio Juxtapoz.
Cause the last relationship fucked her up. Got hurt majorly, finds it tough to trust.
Back in 2004, the UK-based garage-influenced act The Streets released a track called Could Well Be In. The whole song plays out as this first-person perspective of a guy out on a first date with a girl he really likes. The nerves he's experiencing are communicated by playing with the ashtray and peeling off the label on his beer bottle. As he sat there trying to figure out what's going through this girl's head, he's reminded of a segment on a TV show that explained when someone plays with their hair, it means that they're showing signs of interest.
The blokes go easy, so she always won.
I saw this thing on ITV the other week. Said that if she played with her hair, she's probably keen.
The entire track's only got 3 chords in it, and it might not exactly fill a dance floor, but it unpicks the subtlety of body language told through this quintessential British first date, back when we used to be able to go on dates. It's got me thinking about how the nuance behind non-verbal communication is an art form itself. And of course, this got me into thinking about the characters and emotions in the world of today's guest on Radio Juxtapoz, Ania Hobson. Back in 2018, Ania was crowned the Young Portrait Artist of the Year in the prestigious BP Portrait Awards. Seizing the opportunity, she took this moment, she started running, and she hasn't stopped since. Through her work, the trials and tribulations of Ania's personal experiences become stylized reflections of femininity in a modern world. Welcome to Radio Juxtapoz. Today's episode is hosted by Evan Preco and myself, Doug Gillen, still doing our best to make Skype sound good from a world in a seemingly endless lockdown. If you don't already, make sure you hit us up at our new home on Instagram at Radio Juxtapoz. Get in touch. Recommendations for guests you'd like to hear, subjects you'd like to hear us tackle, or, like we have on today's show, questions for the guests. Join us now in conversation with Ania Hobson.
Okay, so this conversation I've been having with people recently, it feels like we're frozen in time, and yet time is moving at an incredibly fast pace. We're going through a weird dichotomy no matter where you are. Do you guys get that feeling?
Yeah, totally. I feel like weirdly time is going really fast. Like it's almost a year now since we've been into the first lockdown, and it's just literally like, we're back nearly in March. It's really strange.
How has that experience?
The first lockdown weirdly was fine for me. I think I actually enjoyed it because being an artist, you're sort of in isolation quite a lot anyway. So I think, I couldn't really go to the studio as well. So I was actually painting at home for a bit, which I struggled with. But I was actually okay with the sort of first lockdown. I think it's this lockdown that I'm a bit like, well...
Which one are we? I can't remember. Is it 6 or 7?
Yeah, there's been so many.
I wanted to comment, this may not make it. Your snow faces today on the car on your Instagram story were brilliant.
I've been seeing quite a few people do them, and it was actually me and my sister, and it took us a few tries, and then once we did it and the light captures it at a certain angle, they look like death masks. It's really weird. Yeah. And so we did quite a few, but they're quite eerie, but really fun to do.
So whereabouts are you just now then?
Suffolk. So I live in Woodbridge. It's about an hour from outside of London.
And your studio's in London? Or am I just making
no, it's in Suffolk.
Because of your
I
accent.
actually... no, I do sort of travel to London quite a lot for sort of interviews and shoots or exhibitions, but my studio is actually in Suffolk. It's about 10 minutes from my house, which is actually really convenient. And
is that where you've always been based?
Yeah, I've always been based in Suffolk. Recently, I've actually been sort of contemplating London. I did a residency at the Falls Project recently, actually, when they started the lockdown, and it made me realize actually that everything's sort of on your doorstep there, galleries, collectors, and just think that's the stage that I'm at. That's quite important, is the networking.
Which is funny because everybody's leaving London right now. Everybody's like running away going, well, all those things, all those fun things are gone.
I'm just curious because you guys are probably both like an hour outside of London. Is there still this a kind of a necessary evil with having to be an hour away from London if you're an artist or in the creative world at this point?
I get a lot of people that assume that I'm in London and they say, why are you not in London? And they do ask me quite a bit. And I think, there is this, I do have this feeling of like, maybe I should be there. But at the same time, my studio rent is so cheap here in Suffolk. And I know in London, you probably have to invest a bit more. And you probably do get a lot more, like I was saying, with the networking. But I do sort of, I feel happy in Suffolk, but it is sort of getting to that stage now where I'm actually just a bit like, I feel like a change would be good, and actually new challenges as well.
Just since you said it, tell us about your studio, because it's kind of got a little history behind it, doesn't it?
Yeah, so my studio is actually on an old American air base. It's now sort of the site's been sold and it's actually become like a business park, and they do a lot of filming, and it's like a film location. And it was actually quite well known for UFO sightings. So it's a strange, it's a really eerie place. They thought they saw some lights in Rendlesham Forest. Actually, I think it's the special air service men were actually interrogated about these incidents of these UFO sightings. So I don't really know whether they were sort of pranks or hoax, and there's all this theories on what they actually were, whether they're practicing sort of firearms. But yeah, it's quite a strange place. Yeah.
Are you a believer?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Is that because you've seen the documents and you've seen what's inside, and you're like, nah, it's all lies?
Yeah, there are people. They actually do a UFO tour around the airbase. So and they show all sort of where they do like I think there's sort of flattening of where the UFO was supposedly like meant to have landed, and so they do sort of do tours and show people this. But I've never done it. I'm actually quite intrigued. I'd like to actually go on one of these tours.
I can't believe you haven't. That would be the number one.
I feel like because Donald Trump was president in the United States, I feel like we would have known by now if there was UFOs, if the moon landing was fake, like all these things. He would have just like one day in a press conference been like, oh, so by the way, I feel like now it's kind of all that stuff has been. Especially
as he started to circle the drain, it would be like, guys, I got a little bit more, vote me back in, and then I'll tell you the rest.
Yeah, exactly. I've definitely taken a backseat on all conspiracy theories now, or any of that stuff. So like, he would have said it. I mean, it's just kind of, we would have known.
Yeah.
How long have you had this studio? Because that's what we had you in the magazine. It's a really nice, substantial space. But how long have you actually been in that space?
I think I've actually been there for a few years now. So I think it might even be coming up to about 3 years, 2.5 years. I don't know. I'm sort of losing count. But the space that I'm in at the moment actually used to be my brother and his wife's studio space. But since they've moved to Belgium, I've moved in. The room that I'm in is actually the old interrogation room. So they actually used to have the two-way mirror, so somebody could actually see in and the other person couldn't. But they've taken that out now, so it's expanded the space. But they've kept the mirror for historical reasons, obviously. But yeah, they used to say that in the small space, it actually used to be a studio space that you could work in. But a lot of people didn't enjoy working in that space because it had quite a weird feeling. They just didn't like the feel of that room, because there must have been some weird stuff going on in that room.
Have you felt anything there?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I really haven't.
Maybe not so much extraterrestrial, but just like a presence.
No, there's literally no feeling. Although sometimes in the evenings, if I'm working quite late and there's no one there, I do sort of it feels a bit cold, and like I do get this weird feeling sometimes when I'm alone and that the the studios, there is this sort of weird
So,
feeling.
so
for
you
me.
don't think
Yeah.
that at any point the fact that you create paintings in an interrogation room has seeped into any of the work that you've done? It's not.
I mean, I'm fascinated just by, I love people watching, and I love sort of reading people's faces, body language. So I think me being in the interrogation room is just sort of like, yeah, that's sort of just entwined a little bit, I think. And yeah, I love sort of expressions, and it's just, that's how we sort of, we communicate with people. That is our biggest form of communication.
Do you feel that you're interrogating your subjects when you're in there, when you're painting?
Yeah, I think, yes. It's quite, yeah, like, yeah.
Why not?
I mean,
Why not?
For the international audience, can you maybe just describe what Suffolk is like? Using as many sort of obvious cliches and stereotypes as you possibly can.
Suffolk's very flat, so literally, like, there's no hills, or like, it's just flat. A lot of farmland. Really sort of nice, like, countryside. Summer, it's really nice here. I think I did quite a few landscape paintings in the forest and stuff. So actually, summertime is the best time to be in Suffolk. But yeah, it's great also just having London like an hour away, because you can escape, and London's only an hour. You go to the city, come back, and escape all of that hustle and bustle. So I just feel like it's a great place to be. Yeah.
Is there a tradition of the arts, like landscape painting, in that area of the country, or is it like, maybe give a little bit of the background of like maybe how art fits into Suffolk?
Yeah, there are loads of there's so many artists actually in Suffolk. There is a lot of landscape sort of paintings, sort of beach paintings. It's a lot of like Suffolk themed landscapes. Yeah, it's sort of, that's a lot of the art that I actually see. Yeah.
And then you went a different way.
Yeah, I've just gone like completely, obscure, like figurative. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when you come from those places where there's like traditional arts and it's always landscape, because I live in a town where everything is landscape painting and like bay scenes and just kind of like, I don't want to say touristy art, but there's a little bit of like the kind of, you are in a certain tourist location kind of art. And it's, anytime I see a figurative painting show up, I'm like, where did this person come from? Like this, it throws off the whole kind of like town galleries. So like, it is kind of different to all of a sudden start doing figurative with the backdrop of a bunch of people doing landscapes.
I started just doing landscape because I think when you see so many people do it, you think, well, maybe I should try do something like that. But I got to the stage where I thought, it's quite hard to actually do a landscape painting, and it didn't really feel me. I feel like I've been a really visual person just with people anyway. I was sort of born partially deaf up until the age of like 3, I think. So I've always been into like people reading, and even at school I used to do sort of like comic strips, and even if I had a diary, I would draw my diary out. I wouldn't actually write it out. I would draw literally these scenes. So I feel like everything for me was people reading. So I think that was always there, and that sort of came out afterwards. The older you get, you just sort of, you figure yourself out more at a certain age, and that sort of comes out. Whereas the landscape for me was more just, thinking, is this what I should be doing, or practicing, and maybe I should give it a go. And it just sort of dwindled out a bit. And I occasionally did the odd landscape, but it's definitely figurative.
Is body language then, because obviously it's such a huge part of your practice. I mean, do you like research this in a sort of psychological manner? Do you go like into that?
No, I don't really. I think because I was so visual from such a young age, I feel like I'm really good at reading people just in general, really, but I haven't researched. I know that actually I've researched things like human can, make up to like 20 expressions, even more. So it's just little things like that. But I just think people watching, you learn so much anyway, just with your eyes. And, that's for me has been the biggest way of actually just sort of figuring out expressions. And yeah, there is just so much you can do with it.
Do you ever find yourself then just sitting and you'll be in a conversation with someone and then you just be like, that little kink that you do with your eyebrow, I need that. Like, can you give me that kink a little bit just so I can take that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I use sort of like my friends or my family to pose for me, and I think I sort of get them to sit in a certain way and say, can you look like this? And they feel comfortable doing it, so that I sort of ask them to pose for me. But
I was gonna ask you about the relationship with your subjects then. So is it exclusively friends and family?
It did actually start off as that. A good few years ago, I did sort of get them to pose for me, but recently I've been trying not to rely on that so much. And actually, I've always wanted to just create figures just from my head and just make up these characters that I've subconsciously seen. Or so recently, I've actually been doing a lot of drawing, which I never used to do before. So I've really been enjoying that, and it's just drawing out these characters. I think using people, you can get stuck in that thing of trying to make them look like that person, whereas I try to sort of distance myself from that and actually just go with, I'm trying to just create something from my head here. So I did actually use my family and friends to begin with, but now it's sort of more, I do use myself as a muse or occasionally use the person, but a lot of it is just sketching now.
I mean, a lot of the works, one of the reasons why they were so attractive, especially when I saw them last summer, was like the social interactions that these characters were having, and these friendships and these bondings and the facial expressions, and the fact that we don't have that right now. There's like this extra emphasis sort of on reminding ourselves of what social interaction is and was. So are you sort of tapping into that a little bit with drawing first before you paint? Like, is there something about the lack of social interaction that is kind of engaging your paintings right now?
Yeah, possibly. I think that is that also. And also, I think with my latest works, I was doing a lot of car paintings, and I was actually looking at the feeling of escapism and that longing to just travel somewhere. So I think it does actually sort of seep into that a bit as well. Yeah, definitely.
Wait, but okay, so some of the faces on the people that are driving, they don't seem like they're super excited to be there's sometimes they have like kind of these looks on their faces where I'm like, like you saying escapism, but sometimes they look like they've had a bad conversation or an argument right before you painted it or something. So what's going on with that sort of the facial expressions in the cars?
I think I've noticed it's probably a reflection of me quite a bit and how I've been feeling and things that I've had to sort of deal with. And I think that does actually come out in my work as well. But also I'm not one to I don't actually paint many people smiling. I think that's just an expression that we can all read, and it's just one expression, although you can have like a nervous smile or like, can sort of have little sort of, but I like my viewers to sort of read into that expression and for them to recognize that with something in themselves, or that's my way of like getting the viewer to connect with my paintings, is just so they can read more into it and come up with their own sort of version of what that person may be thinking, because with a flat expression or whether they're sort of pensive, it's just, you can read so much into that, whether they're angry or sad or contemplating. There's a lot more to it.
Has that ever been problematic when you painted someone trying to, you're painting someone that you're quite close with, and then they're like, hang on, I'm not this grumpy old person that you've depicted me as?
I think that's happened with my sister quite a lot. She has modeled for me sort of for a good few years. I've used her, and there's been a few expressions, and my family obviously can really pick up on it because they know what she's like, and they can say that's totally her. That look is so her. And I can just pick up on these little expressions that she has that even my family can recognize. So I can bring it out sometimes.
Have you ever painted someone, because if you're doing friends and family, you have quite a positive, healthy relationship. Have you ever painted someone who you maybe have a little more friction with, or like, I don't want to say arch nemesis, but
You're also assuming she has healthy relationships with her family, Doug, so we don't know that.
Yeah. Oh, fuck. Of course. Yeah, have you painted people that you maybe have a little bit more friction with, and how did that have anything to it? Did you resolve anything through that?
I don't think so. I think if I've had like a little argument with my sister, maybe it is hard to then paint her portrait. I almost don't want to look at her face when I'm painting. But I think also with a lot of my self-portraits, some of my latest paintings is actually a reflection of maybe what I'm thinking of someone. So whether I actually have had an argument in a past relationship, a lot of my expressions are actually sort of directed towards that person. So it's not, I don't usually paint people that I've got that friction with, but it can come out more in my face.
I was gonna say, when's the last time you actually had somebody sit for you for a portrait?
I think before I actually did the residency, I had somebody come to the studio, so I did a commission. So that was sort of, I can't remember, a few months ago. That was probably the last sitting that I did, yeah.
Did you get them smiling or frowning?
I think he just sort of, he sat there, and I sort of tell my the people to sort of relax, because I don't want them. They can, I think if they're having a commission, they can tense up, and I can sometimes get that in the painting. So I tell them, just relax, and they'll sort of have their hand on their chin, or they're just, they just sit back. So I do draw them, but it is, sometimes they do sort of freeze.
Do you provide them with cigarettes and a cocktail just to get them to kind of like ease into the experience?
Yeah, I just sort of like make them coffee, and I chat also when I'm drawing, which for me is actually quite hard to do, because when I'm talking and drawing, it's so hard to concentrate. So I'm trying to keep them relaxed, and sometimes I'm sort of just finding myself going, yep, and I'm not really even taking into their conversation.
Well, you'll have this episode of Radio Juxtapoz to just play in the background, so it's kind of like they're talking to you.
Yeah.
Slightly not. Since we're in this space, walk us through your process with something like that. I guess is a commission is different to how you would do something that was for an exhibition.
Yeah.
Does the process change, and what is generally the process for you?
The process is completely different. So I get them to come in, and I'd sort of discuss with them, what sort of, how would you like to be seen? And so I sort of get them to sit down, and I would take a few photos first to begin with, and go through the photos and say, this is what you look like. Are you happy with this? We agree on a photo, and in that, so I get them to go back to that position, and then I would draw them for about 45 minutes. I work quite fast anyway, so so I sketch them onto the canvas, and then they leave, and I just paint from the photograph. Sometimes they will come back and do a second sitting, and I'll paint from life. But I think people just sort of are really happy to have, it's that experience for them as well. Like, they've sat for a portrait that they enjoy, so they're happy with that, and they go, and I just, I work quite fast, so I don't really need many sittings, and it's less pressure as well for me. I think I prefer to work alone. I'm sort of quite private like that, so I don't like the pressure, and that way they'll get a better painting.
When you say you work quite fast, what's a canvas ballpark, beginning to end?
Something the old ballpark on how to finish a painting question.
What are we looking at for a canvas here? What's the time?
Yes. So the painting behind me is sort of like 160 times 180 centimeters. I think that one took me probably about a week. Okay. So I work solidly as well. I don't sort of do a little bit and take a step back. I would solidly paint for like 3 to 4 hours and just eat, and then go back to painting.
On one piece, or do you have multiple little things on the go at one time?
Yeah, no, I think when I have an idea, I just want to work on that one painting and just get it out as soon as possible. When I have an idea, I see it in my head already, and I just want it out on the canvas. So for me, it's like it can get a bit overwhelming having 2-3 paintings, because I'll probably be looking at the other one and it's like a distraction for me. So for me, it's always just the one on the go, and then I'll just sort of go through them like that.
So, I mean, I think for listeners who cannot see what we can see behind you, this is the painting behind you is more of a cafe outdoor scene, cigarette smoking woman sitting down. There's a conversation going on in the back. There's a man walking by and he's looking over at the woman smoking. This is definitely something this is one of the ones that came in your head and you had to paint. There's no poet, there was nobody who sat for any of this part of the painting process.
So this one's called Gossip, and so it's about actually a lot of it actually it's about like a situation that maybe I've been through, and I want to show people that, you know, whatever you can say about something, it can affect people in a certain way. And so there's a piece of paper flying in the background which says fake news on it. And I actually got my sister to pose. Okay. So we sort of acted it out, and had photographs taken of us. So we were it's a bit like doing a bit of theatre as well with it. So it's trying to get, again, those expressions. I want them to be sort of, like truthful expressions. So we sort of acted it out. So it is actually partly posed, and some of the figures are actually made up. So yeah. What's
the story behind it?
So it's literally about this. You're really putting me on the spot. It is just about things. It is just basically looking at sort of gossiping and how it can sort of make someone feel. And for me, it is a lot of it is about getting it out there and just closure. And from painting is just like therapy as well. Once you've got it out there, it's just like you feel better for it. It's just, and that's what art is about. It's about documenting as well your life, and you know, people have read into this and they sort of come up with their own interpretations, but I don't really fully give it away. And I think some people, they know what it's about, and they sort of they look at me like, I know what that's about.
I got more out of that than I thought you were going to be like,
I know, for sure.
Nothing. I ain't saying nothing on that.
I can't believe we glossed over this, but you mentioned something about your diary as a kid would be pictures as opposed to words. Yeah. I want to know a little bit more about that, because that is, I don't know if that's like a common thing, because I kept a journal, I guess, at some point in my life, but let's talk a little bit about that. Like how did that look? Were you like the kid in school that everybody wanted like their picture drawn of? You know, like how was that relationship with the world?
I was really into sort of comic strips. I used to love reading like Garfield, Calvin and Hobbes. So I think that was sort of came into my diary. But also at school, I used to sort of do all these drawings for people in my class as well. So I sort of do these cartoons of people, and I just think that was my way of actually just sort of getting things down. And it's just a lot about probably me and how I wasn't really sort of good on writing and stuff as well. Like I wasn't bad, but I just think I'd like to see things, and drawing these sort of comic strips.
What's your relationship with comics as you've gotten older and as you've become a fine art painter? Do you still have a relationship with the comic format, you think, or do you think it's completely just, it was an entry point and then it changed?
I think it's definitely just like an entry point, because I don't actually really, read many comics now. There was a phase of reading a lot of Asterix and sort of Tintin. I got all those old books of them, but now I really don't do that. But I do feel like it is sort of in my work, my latest work especially. I feel like if I was to line my paintings up, it could almost be like a comic strip. I think that's why a lot of my figures are looking out of the painting, because I want that story to continue on to the next. So it's almost like this, whatever they're watching it, what's more, probably fascinating is happening outside the painting, and I'm just looking at how they're reacting to what's going on outside. So, that's sort of how I kind of see my paintings, as a bit like a comic strip.
Does that inform exhibitions then? Does that is this like one collection of a particular story that you're trying to do, and then it's the closure and then on to the next, or is it just a permanent loop?
I think it's just like with each individual painting, but recently I have actually been thinking, since I've been doing it, that maybe I should do sort of this comic sort of strip of paintings and create this story through my work. So that's actually been a new idea that I've actually sort of been thinking about doing.
Wait, so comics you still do have comics still kind of permeating through a little bit. Maybe not Garfield, but
yeah, yeah, I feel like weirdly my work has reverted back to what I was doing as a kid. Even with the people and the women that I'm painting, weirdly, it's only recently that I've noticed that the women that I'm drawing is exactly what I was drawing at primary school. It's so strange. I'm kind of like, yeah, it's strange. There's definitely a connection.
Well, I mean, I guess, comics, you have to convey emotions without words. And so just that skill set is something that is like the best comic artists can do. You can do an entire page without a word being said and like exactly what's happening. So I guess that it makes sense.
You said all the women that you're painting at the moment. What's the drive of that, and then what's the difference for you between painting a female figure or a male figure?
So with the female figures, I think that actually started with the painting that I did for the National Portrait Gallery of the portrait of two female painters. And I was just trying to show. Was
that the one that you won the award?
Yeah, that's the one that I won the award with. And
we just wanted you to say that.
You didn't say it. You didn't say it, but we'll bring it in. She was humble. That was the time that I won the Young Artist Award at the Award.
Yeah, so I think that sort of like continued throughout. That sort of got a lot of recognition with feminist blogs, and it just sort of that definitely continued throughout. So I sort of paint my women in like these big sort of almost military coats and boots, and just want them to come across as quite sort of strong and powerful, and just actually how we are now. And a lot of it is actually how I dress as well. So I think, again, it's a reflection of myself. Yeah.
Was that a big career shift? Like, was that kind of where, I mean, obviously the recognition picks up, but like, was there something that just, I look at my career before 2018, I look at my career after, and it's just so different?
That definitely pushed my work out. And it's when you get an award like that, I think you really have to use it. And I think I tried to sort of use it in I thought, okay, now I'm going to do a show. You get so much exposure and attention. And I think, so doing a show, I thought I'll use that attention from the award to actually get people to come to my show. So it's like, you've just got to keep this thing going. You've got to have like a business mind on it as well, which I think really, really helps. And it's just every time you get an interview from the exposure that you're getting, put it out there on Instagram so people are reading it, and then they see, oh, that's a great interview, and it just keeps going on like that, and you've just got to keep pushing it.
Not to backtrack, but for the international audience, can you, either of you, explain what the award is and like how one is nominated?
Yes, one.
Yeah. How one gets. Yeah.
I get one.
No, because it's something that like, I've read about, but I'm just curious, like what from your standpoint, like what that award is and what it means.
So it's one of the most well-known portrait competitions, I think, in the world, I think. So you submit your painting that you want to show, and it goes through like a first and a second round. So it's first is an online submission, and then they decide whether it goes into the exhibition, and then you get another notification of you've got your painting into the show. Then I think a week after that, I got a phone call saying that I was then shortlisted for an award, but they couldn't tell me what award it was. They just said, you've got an award, you'll find out on the day. And I think my hunch was that it's definitely the young artist, because I was under 30 at the time. So I thought it's definitely got to be maybe that award. So I already sort of knew. But for, I think, a month or 2 months, they said you can't actually put it on social media. So that was like really hard to sort of hold. They said you can tell your friends and your family, but just whatever you do, don't put it on social media until they do their press release of these are the runners up, and and then you can tell people. So yeah, and then they do the ceremony. So I went in, and they sort of they call you up. And so when I got the Young Artist Award, yeah, you go up, collect the award, and it was just such an amazing experience. Like, yeah.
What makes a portrait stand out then? Because obviously you stood out in that collection.
I think I don't know. I think I went on the whole sort of like women theme, and I know like it is obviously it was a big sort of, everyone was talking about, women in power and women, and equal rights. So I think I sort of picked that subject hoping that they might pick up on the title of why I've painted it. And I think, yeah, that painting took me I actually left it quite late. So it was like 2 weeks until the deadline. But I thought actually even the size, I wanted it to be quite big to make it quite bold and like quite in your face, which is why I've got the shoe coming forward. And I sort of changed the perspective a bit. So it's like a big shoe. I just wanted to do something slightly different. And I think that's what they look for, is actually something quite different. And that stands out.
I mean, when I think of famous figurative painters, it obviously it gets dominated by male artists, as most things tend to be, I guess, until recently, when like happily the narrative is changing. But I think of famous female artists. It always tends to lean towards abstraction. I mean, maybe Cindy Sherman has a little bit of a portraiture style, but do you feel like it's sort of a genre and a style that female artists can now start owning more?
There's so many female artists that I haven't actually even been aware of that are like all now coming to light, and their work is just so strong. And I just think, I just like, I love I've seen Cindy Sherman's, like I love her stuff as well. I just think what she does with all these characters and that she makes, and it's just, I think there are so many great women artists out there, and there's just such a variety.
Who's the greatest of all time? Who's the GOAT?
I think my favorite artist is definitely Paula Rego. I love her work. She's sort of just how she again documents her life, and actually just how she paints her figures as well. They're just sort of they're not sort of anatomically correct, and they're quite sort of stocky, and it's quite strange. And I think a lot of her character comes out in her work, and I think she's quite sort of a quirky person, and that definitely comes out. So I really enjoy her work.
I like it. That was good. You had an answer, which I love.
This idea, you touched on it when you said about this. You got this award, and then it was just hustle for you. This idea of hustle, is this something that you learned through school, or is this just like you being a smart person understanding that you got to hustle to do this, or is it something that you're kind of taught in the through the institutional education system, that by the way, this award will potentially change your life if you let it?
Yeah, no, it wasn't anything that I was taught. I actually wasn't taught any of that at university. So it was something that I sort of decided to, it's something you learn yourself. And I think also just wanting something really bad, and like knowing that the art world is actually really competitive as well. So I thought, okay, great, this is a really good opportunity to just actually push my work out there. And when you want something so much, you just have to be quite sort of savvy with like Instagram and social media. That is such a great platform, and I think that's definitely helped as well. And you've got gallerists and collectors all watching this sort of behind the scenes. You don't even really know who's watching you at the end of the day. So I sort of used it in the sense of, I've got this award, I'm just going to produce this whole new series of work and just put it online, like almost like an online exhibition, so people can see that, oh, she's still producing and still working. And I think it is something you just sort of have to sort of do yourself, and I wasn't really taught any of that at university.
When you win an award like that, no one like pulls you aside and be like, well, and here's now the blueprint to your future success. So did anyone provide any sort of context or advice of like, well, this, now that you've won this award, the attention's gonna switch, or was there none of that?
No, there was none of that. I think you've always got to sort of have a good sort of head on you as well, and thinking that, it might not work, and, sometimes if it doesn't work, you shouldn't be sort of let down. You shouldn't feel let down by it. And it's just, I never like to sort of set goals for myself as well, I think, because it's just the unknown. Like, you just don't know. The art world is just literally like so up and down. So I think, yeah, you just sort of have to keep on going. And if something doesn't work, you've just got to learn from those mistakes and actually see it as a challenge just to push yourself further.
On the subject of the education and going through art school, you studied in London and Italy?
I was at Ipswich University, and then I did short courses in London, and then I did a sort of 3 weeks at the Florence Academy of Art, which I created like a funding project online to sort of get the money and to study over there.
What was the biggest difference between being in, like, the way that they approached it in Britain as opposed to the way that the institution approached it in Italy?
In Italy, their techniques are really based on like the Renaissance style of painting. So they sort of can show you how to mix paints with like an egg white, or just creating all the sort of the raw undertones. It's just the basis of how you start a portrait. So they are quite traditional in that way. And I wasn't painting in a traditional style, but I thought, sometimes it's good to go back to the basics and actually learn these techniques. And just being in Italy as well, like surrounded by all these like Botticellis and, Leonardo da Vinci's and Michelangelo's, like, it's just the raw art is just all around you. So that definitely inspires you quite a lot. But it didn't really change my style, but I learned so much from just those traditional techniques.
I've heard from some contemporary Italian painters that have been in the magazine over the years that there is a little bit of, they feel a little confined to a certain historical Italian style, and that it's hard to break out of that. Have you ever felt like slightly like you had to uphold any traditions within the British painting kind of lexicon, or do you feel freed a bit from that?
Yeah, I think there was a stage of my painting that I felt like it was quite traditional. And again, I was thinking, if I want to get my work noticed, I thought I'd want to do something slightly different, because in Italy at the Florence Academy of Art, there is just this one style, and they're incredible paintings, technically, like really, really good paintings. But I just wanted to create something that was slightly different and more suited for me. And that also, I think, is just like a natural progression of just you as a person as well. Like, I feel like my artwork changes because I'm changing. It's not because I'm forcing a change. I just think it's something within me that, I feel like my work's constantly changing. So there was just a stage where I just looked at my painting and thought, it just doesn't feel me anymore. And there is like this middle bit where you're sort of painting, but you're a little bit lost of like, well, I don't really know where this is going. And then this one painting comes out and you just think that's what I want to be doing. And it sort of goes from there.
What was that painting?
Yeah, it was a self-portrait of me at a table, which actually was exhibited at the BP Portrait Awards the first time round. And I had about 2 months of not painting, which is probably the longest time I've ever gone without painting. And I just had this painter's block, and I thought, I can't paint. And it was just so frustrating. It's weird having that taken out of it made me realize how much it means to me, painting. But that was the first painting that I did after that break of just, I think, it was just like figuring myself out and just figuring other things out. So again, I think that painting for me was like, this is fresh. It's like a fresh start for me. And it sort of went from there. And that was actually gaining, it got a lot of attention as well. So I thought, well, people are enjoying this. So I sort of went on to that as well, with more like the business mind on it as well. Yeah.
In that same thread, this is actually, we had a question submitted by longtime Radio Juxtapoz superfan Dustin Emery. And Dustin asks us, what's something that you are insecure about in your work or practice? And I think that kind of fits into exactly where you were kind of sitting. And I think it's a really strong question.
There's been so many times where I've looked at my painting, think, And I've looked at it before I've left the studio and think, that's great. And then I come back and think, oh, like, is that really bad? And I think there's always that slight insecurity with painting of, will people like this? But you've just got to get that out of your mind, because, art is like an identity at the end of the day. It is what you're producing, and you're not sort of really producing. We sort of are for other people, but it's got to be truthful to yourself. So it is like, putting yourself out on a plate for people to see. And again, with like, if I'm painting myself, there can be certain expressions that come out and people are like, you don't look happy, or you look a bit sort of confused. And I'm like, well, maybe I was at the time. So that it can sort of like, I can feel quite insecure with my work, sometimes, and then it can always sort of change. Yeah.
Have you ever been given good advice?
Yeah, I did actually.
Doug, I thought that was a great question, because I was like, I don't think I've ever gotten good advice from anybody ever. So
have you ever been given good advice, and do you remember it?
No, definitely. I think I met this artist years ago, and he said, I think it was literally the early stages of me taking it professionally, and he said there will be times where nothing happens, and he said people actually in that time they give up, and you're just making way for the people that actually want to take their work further, but you've just got to stick at it and it will always pick up again. And I've always had that in my head. So when there's been quiet periods in like with my painting, I just think, okay, it's just a little bit flat at the moment. I'm just going to carry on working and it'll always pick up, and it does. So I think that's probably the best advice I've ever had. Yeah, like that's always sort of stayed in my head.
Who was it that gave you that? You said someone gave you, and do you remember who? You got to give them a shout out. They gave you advice that stuck with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, he's called Paul Benny. I did a studio visit, and I remember him always saying, stick with it. So he actually gave me that, and that always stuck with me.
It's on record now.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Yeah, it is.
Immortalized. Paul Benny, you're here.
But that advice played out, because you took a break, and then when you re-entered the studio and you made a painting that it changed the way that you were approaching painting, and it ended up working out really well. So that advice does actually really play out.
Yeah, definitely. It really does. And actually just support at the end of the day is the one thing that definitely keeps you going as well, when you're sort of having these sort of insecure moments with your work, and it's the support. I think that is the main thing that actually keeps you going. Advice is great, we can all take it in our own way, but it is the support and that pushes you a lot as well.
From what I understand, your great grandfather was a painter, a quite well-renowned painter. Do you ever feel that you were kind of, or was there ever a conversation that you had with yourself about kind of carrying a legacy, or was it just a happy coincidence?
I just think it may have been a coincidence. I don't know. I think being a painter, I don't know whether it's something, the painting and the creative side definitely was more from my parents, but I don't know whether, again, that was from my mum. My dad was very creative. My mum is also very creative. So I think that was what probably pushed me. So as kids, we were always drawing at the table. Like our kitchen table was just full of like these felt tip pens and just all this sort of paper everywhere. We were just constantly drawing, and they're there. And like my dad is a really good watercolor painter, and he used to live in Kenya, so he painted all these African birds. And I remember him teaching me sort of the anatomy of the bird and where the eyes should be in line with the beak. So it's all these weird, like scientifical drawings that I remember him teaching me. And my mum, is very good at like illustrative drawings, and she does actually like traditional Polish folk design furniture now as well. So it's definitely in both of them. And that it does sort of then get, it does sort of inspire you. Yeah.
Did I see that you just recently got Polish citizenship? Did I see that correctly?
Yes, I have.
Congratulations.
I've got Polish citizenship. Thank you. Oh, it feels amazing.
Yeah, what's going to go on with that?
It's my mum's Polish, and I think also it's a lot of it's about Brexit as well, like
of course it is.
Here we go.
It is, but also like, I voted to sort of stay in the EU as well, but I just think people don't really realize like how this is actually going to affect a lot of, you know, people in the creative industry, in the music industry, and like, you know, touring, and it's all of this stuff.
Incredible. It is utterly incredible. Without going into it too much, it's just, you just sit and you look at it and you're like, what?
Yeah, I just saw some interview that the bass player from Radiohead gave about how hard this is going to be for bands even of that size to tour. Just how insane like it's going to be, and how much money is generated by these bands just for the economy in general. And just I didn't realize how hard it's going to be for creatives.
Imagine just being like, you know, the band that's on tour, that's kind of, you know, all bundled into the back of a van that's kind of just going around Europe. No, Britain's off. And, you know, we're talking about culture. Culture brings in like an estimated 100 billion into the economy a year.
Insane. No, it's insane. It's insane. I did not realize.
It is. It is. And, you know, being a creative, that's where your inspiration's from, you know. And for these people, this is what is like I said, it's that support that they're getting, and like it's what keeps that drive going. So, you know, for me, like I like painting abroad as well. You know, that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from, and also, you know, it's just, I could go on as well.
So are you thinking about relocating?
I've always wanted to sort of actually live abroad for a bit. I just want to, you know, I've definitely wanted to do it. I think there's just so much to explore, and, you know, there's so much culture to take in. And it's just, I think during this lockdown as well, I've really struggled actually not traveling. And when I travel, I'm inspired so much by taste, sounds, and colors. And so it is really, really important, you know, being a creative and actually having that. So I have sort of felt like I would like to just sort of, you know, try living somewhere abroad for a while.
Since we've just brought this up, I might have prepared a couple of questions for you on Polish things, and I was gonna test your citizenry through a couple of prepared questions. I just want to see how Polish you really are.
Okay. My mum's going to be really disappointed.
This is important, because I imagine this would have, did you get the Polish did you get the Polish citizenship just because your mum's Polish, or did you have to answer any questions? No,
she's entitled to getting the passport, and for her it's really important because it's just this sense of this like this, you know, that's who she is at the end of the day. But I think me, my brother, my sister, we're all entitled to one as well. So when she was applying for the citizenship, they then said, you know, do you want your children to have one? And she said, yes, you know, well, I'll get them one. So it was.
So good luck with these questions. Just pretend I'm in the Polish embassy and this is how you get your granted visa or not, citizenship or not. How many European bisons currently live in the primeval forest?
Do you know, that should be something I should know.
The heaviest, I just like to say, the European bison is the heaviest animal in Europe. How many currently live in the Polish primeval forest?
It would be like, do you know, I'm going to just take a guess here. I would say thousands. It's got to be in the thousands, surely. My parents are zoologists, you know, they're just.
Oh, Jesus. This is like, that's getting.
Evan, and just in case you want to pretend that you're a better Pole.
I'm going to say there is 105.
105. Oof. Okay. So we've got, I'm going to go with thousands because you said thousands there. It's actually 800. So.
800.
There you go, everybody.
Okay.
Don't worry, I've not got too many of these. What is the smigus dingus? What? All right, let me ask that again. What is the smigus dingus? I spent just as much time researching Polish things as I did about your background.
I honestly couldn't say. I'm so confused.
Evan, for you, what is the smigus dingus?
Is it a mountain?
Oh, close, very close. It is the name of the Monday that follows Easter when people run about using super soakers and water pistols to soak each other. The Smegus Dingus. Okay, I have one last question. Don't worry.
What the fuck was that? Okay.
This might not make it. the Pewinica, Swedenica. The Pewinica Swedenica is the oldest restaurant in Europe. It's still open today, and you can go in there. But when did it open? The oldest restaurant in Europe. It's in Poland.
I've only ever visited Poland once, so
Okay.
I can, I can speak a bit of Polish, but my history on it is not great.
These are all things that you could just guess.
I'd say I don't know, it's been going for maybe 70 years.
Okay. Evan?
I'm gonna say it was medieval times, kind of 700 years ago, 600 years, 800
I need a
years
date. I need a date.
1235.
Fuck. 1275.
Oh wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the Polish citizenry test. Doesn't matter that you failed it. You've got Polish blood, so up yours. Amazing. So was just staying in there. Was Poland and Polish culture a big part of your upbringing?
Yeah, I think we celebrate our Christmas on Christmas Eve. So we have our Polish Christmas on Christmas Eve, and then we do our English Christmas Day. Yeah, and obviously my mum as well. We're trying to learn Polish. It's just such a difficult language as well. So, my mum has definitely put a lot of her culture into the family as well. So, the foods and yeah.
You heard Doug trying to pronounce Polish words, so that was definitely...
I glanced over that there. I was like, Smegus Dingus sounds amazing, but I don't think that's how it's actually said. I think it sounds a little Gaelic when I say it.
It's like tongue twisting with Polish language. It's totally all in the tongue. It's really hard, but my favorite Polish food is pierogi, which is these dumplings filled with potato or mushroom, sledge, which is what we have for Christmas Eve, which is a lot of it is pickled and fish. So it's herring with apple and sort of this, cream sour sort of on sourdough bread. And you do a shot of vodka and say Nastarovia, and you take a bite and you do. So it's vodka fueled Christmas Eve with pierogi, and yeah.
I had some amazing pierogi the other day at a farmer's market. There was a Polish lady that just who does pierogies. That's it. It's amazing.
They really fill you up, but they're just I could eat so much of it, but it can make you quite sick.
Yeah, it's proper winter.
Proper
There's a lot of a mixture of shots of vodka and pierogi and shots of vodka that.
No, it's really good. Yeah, I love the Christmas Eves. Yeah.
When the lockdown and when all this when life goes back to some sort of semblance of what we used to know as life, where do you want to travel to first?
Formentera, because my mum's actually my grandparents built a house in Formentera, Spain, and so it's like a second home there, and it's a place that I go to just sort of relax and actually just paint as well and draw, and it's just a chill out place for me, and it just feels so sort of far away from everything here in Suffolk. So it's this for me, it's detaching myself from the stress of everything, and the house is in the forest and it's near the beach, and it's just perfect place to just unwind. So I think that's for me the first place that I want to go to. Yeah,
this is the first place I want to go to.
Yeah, seriously. I heard forest beach in Spain. I was like, oh, cool. All right.
I was just going to say, what is the rest of... I know it's kind of all obviously up in the air, but what is the rest of your year looking like? You got anything kind of concrete at the moment?
So I've got a solo show coming up in London in May. Hopefully, sort of they want to do a doors open, but I don't know with this COVID situation whether we'll have people coming in, but that's set. And I have a solo show in September in Dusseldorf, in Germany. So that's my first solo show abroad. So I'm quite excited about that. So,
and hopefully you will be able to.
And hopefully you can travel to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be able to go to that. Yeah. I think that's it really. So yeah, a lot of it is just painting.
I like that. 2 solo shows. That's it. That's a busy year.
Yeah, it is busy. Yeah, I just feel like last year it was quite hectic, and I was doing a residency after my first solo show in London, and it's just sort of like, it just is sort of, it's great though to be in that position where you've got things lined up. I sort of feel quite, like happy about that. Yeah.
Hey, look at that. An interview and some life-improving facts about Poland. Don't say we're not good to you. Thanks again to Ania for sitting down with us. We really enjoyed getting to speak with you. Be sure to hit her up on the socials. We'll leave links in the description. We will be back with you all real soon. Till then, take care of yourselves and each other.
She's playing with her hair well regularly, so I reckon I could well be in.